The blizzard came down like a white curtain, erasing the horizon and trapping everything beneath its frozen hand. The wind howled through the canyon, rattling the shutters of the lonely ranch cabin where Jake Dalton had taken shelter. He'd been riding for hours, trying to reach Fort Silver Creek before nightfall, but now the trail was gone, buried under feet of snow. His horse shivered beside the cabin, and Jake's own fingers were numb as he struggled to light the last lantern. The storm was getting worse. He'd been through winters before, but never one that felt this personal, like nature itself wanted him to stay put, to face something he couldn't yet see. He managed to get the fire going, but it barely took the edge off the cold. Outside, the snow roared like an ocean. Inside, the silence pressed hard. Jake poured himself a shot of whiskey and stared into the flames. He was thinking about the long trail behind him, the broken deal, the ambush that cost his men their lives, and the bullet wound on his shoulder still aching under his coat. He wasn't just a traveler tonight. He was a man running from ghosts. That was when he heard it, 3 sharp knocks at the door. Jake froze. Out here, miles from any settlement, that sound shouldn't have existed. The wind screamed louder as he reached for his revolver, cocking it quietly. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. Just another knock, slower, heavier this time. He stepped closer, boots creaking on the wooden floor. "If you're lost, speak up," he said, voice rough from the cold. The latch rattled, and before he could react, the door swung open with a crash of snow and wind. A figure stepped through, a tall woman, wrapped in a tattered blanket, her dark hair slick with ice, her eyes burning like amber coals. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Jake lowered his gun slightly. She wasn't shivering, though snow clung to her lashes. She looked like a storm given human shape. "You'll freeze out there," Jake muttered. "Come in." She didn't move. "I was already here," she said, voice deep and calm. "You came to my mountain." Her accent was Apache, her tone steady, proud. Jake frowned. "Ma'am, I just needed shelter. I didn't mean no disrespect." She looked around the cabin, then back at him, her gaze piercing. "Then you will share the fire," she said. "In the bed, or you will die before dawn." Jake blinked. "The bed," he repeated. "Listen, I'm fine by the fire." But her eyes flashed. "The spirits are cold tonight. They follow strangers who sleep alone." She stepped closer, the air around her somehow warmer. "You can fight the storm, or you can survive it. Choose." Jake opened his mouth to argue, but the wind outside screamed like a dying animal, shaking the cabin. The fire sputtered. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes that wasn't threat, but urgency. She wasn't joking. He swallowed. "Fine," he said finally. "You win." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She closed the door behind her, the wind dying as if tamed by her presence. When she turned back to him, the fire suddenly flared brighter. "Then it's settled," she said quietly. "Tonight, you will share my warmth, or the mountain will take you." Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside, the cabin was a small island of light. Jake sat on the floor, back to the wall, watching the woman as she moved near the fire. She had stripped away the snow-soaked blanket, revealing simple buckskin clothing, worn but sturdy. Her skin gleamed bronze in the firelight, her movements quiet, deliberate. She hadn't spoken much since entering, and Jake hadn't dared to ask her name. She seemed as much a part of the wilderness as the snow and the wind themselves. Finally, she turned to him. "Why do you travel alone?" she asked. Jake hesitated, then sighed. "I used to have men with me. Partners. We were hauling goods to Santa Fe. Bandits hit us 2 nights ago." He touched his shoulder. "I'm the only one left breathing." She studied him for a moment, eyes softening just slightly. "So you run from death," she said. "And it follows you." Jake looked at her sharply. "You talk like you know it." She nodded. "I do. It took my husband. It took my village. The snow remembers all things lost." Something in her tone made the fire crackle lower, as if the room itself was listening. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Instead, she stood and crossed the room toward the bed, a crude thing made of wood and furs. She turned back, gaze steady. "The night grows colder," she said simply. "You will lie here, beside me." Jake felt his heart pound in his chest. "Lady, I don't want to disrespect you," but she cut him off with a look that froze his words. "This isn't about want, it's about survival." She lay down, motioning for him to join. He hesitated, then finally gave in. The furs were warm, her body warmer still. The scent of smoke and pine clung to her skin. For a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the wind screamed and clawed at the cabin walls, but inside, time seemed to stop. "You have the mark," she murmured suddenly, her voice a whisper near his ear. "The mark of one who should have died." Jake turned to look at her, startled. "What do you mean?" She touched his shoulder where the wound was, her fingers tracing the scar. "The bullet that struck you was meant for your heart. The spirits spared you. That means you owe them balance." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Balance," he repeated. "What kind of balance?" She closed her eyes. "We'll see by dawn." Then she fell silent. As the night deepened, Jake lay awake, listening to her breathing, feeling the strange pull of the world outside. The fire dimmed, but the cabin stayed warm. It was as if the storm itself couldn't touch the space they shared. When sleep finally came, it was heavy and dreamless, except for one fleeting image, the woman standing barefoot in the snow, whispering something in a language he couldn't understand as a red moon rose behind her. Jake woke to silence. The storm was gone. Sunlight poured through the cracks in the cabin, catching on the frost-like glass. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream, until he felt the empty space beside him. The bed was still warm, but the woman was gone. He sat up quickly. Her blanket, her tracks, even her scent, vanished. Only the faint outline of her hand on the wooden door remained, carved into the frost like a signature. He stepped outside. The valley was buried in white, yet peaceful. The air was so still he could hear his own breath. Then he saw something that made him stop cold. In front of the cabin, half buried in the snow, stood a small bundle. The fire burned low, its orange light crawling across the log walls, throwing long shadows that danced like spirits. Jake sat near the hearth, hands outstretched, trying to absorb every drop of warmth. The woman, she still hadn't told him her name, sat across from him, silent, her eyes fixed on the flames. Her face was calm, but there was something ancient behind that calmness, something that made Jake uneasy. She didn't seem like someone who merely survived in the wilderness. She seemed like someone who belonged to it. The wind outside moaned softly now, as if it had finally surrendered to her will. The silence pressed heavy between them until Jake finally spoke. "You said the spirits follow strangers who sleep alone. You really believe that?" She looked up slowly, her dark eyes glimmering in the light. "I don't believe," she said. "I know." Her voice carried the weight of truth, not superstition. "When the storm comes down from the mountains, it brings the restless ones, the lost warriors, the forgotten hunters. They wander in the cold, searching for warmth. If they find none," she looked at him, and for a heartbeat, Jake saw something, shapes in the firelight, faint outlines of figures moving just beyond sight. He blinked, and they were gone. "They take your heat for their own," she finished quietly. Jake swallowed. He wanted to laugh it off, but the cabin felt too strange, too alive for mockery. "So," he said, trying to sound casual, "you think lying close to someone keeps them away?" She nodded. "A body that shares breath cannot be taken. That is the law of the storm." Jake rubbed his neck, suddenly aware of how cold the air felt between them. "Then I guess I should thank you," he said, forcing a smile. "You might have saved my hide." Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "You're not safe yet," she murmured. "The night is not done." Then, without another word, she stood and walked to the small bed of pelts near the corner. She sat on it, turning toward him. "You will lie here, now." Her tone left no room for argument. Jake hesitated, every bit of his Western pride and politeness wrestling inside him. "Ma'am, I ain't one to intrude," he said carefully. "I can manage by the fire." But her eyes flashed with something primal. "If you sleep alone, you die alone," she said simply. "If you share my bed, you live to see morning." The wind groaned outside again, and something heavy slammed against the door, maybe a branch, maybe something else. The fire flickered low. Jake cursed softly under his breath and gave in. "All right," he said. "You win." He rose, wincing as his wounded shoulder throbbed, and walked to her side. The bed was small, barely room for one, let alone two, but she shifted slightly, making space. He lay down, the pelts soft beneath him, her body warm beside his. For the first time that night, the cold seemed to retreat. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. The fire's last embers glowed like dying stars. He could feel her steady breathing against his arm, hear the faint rhythm of her heart. It was strange, comforting and haunting at the same time. Then she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You carry pain," she said. "In your shoulder, and in your soul." Jake tensed. "You could say that," he muttered. Lost some good men, lost more than that. Her hand moved gently, touching the bandaged wound beneath his shirt. He should have flinched, but her touch was warm, almost soothing. The spirits spared you, she said. Not because you are strong, but because you are not finished. Jake turned his head, staring at her profile in the firelight. You talk like you know my story. Her lips curved faintly. I know death's story. Yours still has pages left. There was something both beautiful and unsettling in the way she said it. He didn't know if she was comforting him or warning him. And what's your story? He asked quietly. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Snow pressed against the glass like ghostly hands. Once, I was wife to a hunter, she said softly. The mountains took him. I went after him, but the snow swallowed my trail. When I returned, nothing remained. No fire, no family, no voice. Only the cold. Since then, I walk between storms, helping those the spirits mark for death. Jake felt a chill despite her warmth beside him. And if you don't find them? He asked. Her eyes met his, deep as the winter sky. Then the mountain keeps their bones. The fire guttered, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw shadows moving along the walls again, figures crouched, whispering, reaching. He shuddered. The woman shifted closer, her body pressing against his for heat. Breathe, with me, she said. Keep your heart steady. He obeyed, inhaling slowly, exhaling with her rhythm. Outside, the storm howled one last time, then fell silent. In that stillness, time seemed to stop. Jake could no longer tell if he was awake or dreaming. Her face was inches from his, her eyes half closed. If I sleep, he whispered, will you still be here come morning? She didn't answer. Her hand brushed his cheek. Sleep, cowboy, she murmured. If dawn comes, you'll know. The wind faded completely. The last ember glowed, then died. Jake felt the warmth of her body, the beat of her heart, and then, nothing but darkness, deep and endless, as the mountain held its breath around them.